All right, gang. He just disappeared from the screen in pure Diego fashion. He's like a jumping bean, man, bouncing around, doing his thing. This is a great one. Diego, right? I believe Diego was my first person interview that we've ever done on Wake Up Humans. So we figured let's review it a couple years later. What's up, Diego? How you doing, brother?
I am spectacular as usual. How are you?
I'm awesome. I'm stuck in Florida. You guys got this impending nor'easter up there. Nothing's hitting you, right?
No, it's just a little drizzle, and every once in a while, some puff of something comes, but nope, nothing exciting.
It's absolutely amazing, man. It was Armageddon. My flight was delayed for like hours and hours. They kept pushing it back. I was going to land at like 4 a.m. I'm like, the heck with this.
Yeah,
I'll stay here, man, and sip my
absolutely,
coffee.
and brave the warmth. What's the temperature down there, just so I can warm up?
It's 80 right now. It's a little chilly.
80. All right. What you drinking?
I got some black coffee with local honey. I got a guy up the road that makes honey, man. It's awesome.
Mm.
Good
It's
stuff.
funny that I get a local honey from a Hartford school that it tastes different. Like it just tastes delicious just from your area. I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm used to the pollen in the air, but whatever it is, it's delicious. I am drinking an Argentine tea called mate, which was made popular in the World Cup recently. So some of my athletes are like, Diego, the Argentina team is drinking this thing with a straw, and it's mate. So
Mate
mate, delicious. Yerba mate
out of a metal straw. I love it.
out of
So
a metal straw.
how would you introduce yourself to our audience? I mean, it's been a while since they probably heard your voice, but who is Diego? What does Diego do?
So the biggest thing that I've realized is kind of my gift, my mission is to empower young athletes to kind of move through grit. And what I do professionally is I work with young athletes anywhere from that middle school, maybe a little bit younger, all the way now to the collegiate level. So a few things have changed since I last spoke with you, but I now coach at the collegiate level at Eastern Connecticut State University on the women's side. And so what I do is really take sport and athletics, and my main niche now, my concentration is all soccer players. And
Yeah.
I through strength development, technical development, kind of like build a, secretly build a better human, but ultimately build a better athlete that's able to get better results than what they could have done on their own. So, and I do that in a lot of different ways.
Now, there's a couple avenues I want to go on this because there's, what you and I talk a lot about is the mental aspect,
Yep.
building that human and what we're seeing with the youth today. And then there's the physical, which is, back in the day, if you told me I was going to pay for my kids to do youth sports and training, I would have told you you're nuts. But the culture has dramatically changed. I mean, down here in Florida, it's absolutely insane the training these kids are doing. Parents up there will say, well, what's different? Why are these athletes so much better? These kids do not stop training all the time. And they'll say to me, well, because it's warm all the time. No, because these kids are raised mentally to a certain standard that, we're in Venice, the high school, they're all about winning states. If you didn't win states, it was a bad year. If you were runner up in states, it was a bad year. So they've developed a culture of a standard of thinking that these kids, where Kane will say, we're going to train or we're going to lift on his own. I don't have to push them at all. It's just, that's what the kids do. What are you seeing in this culture that's shifted greatly?
I'm going to take a sip because this is going to be a heavy answer.
Okay.
So the reason why is because I've seen a lot shift that I don't understand, but then I've also seen a shift in the dynamics, and this is going to be controversial, but I'm pretty sure you have no problem with that. But the shift in the dynamics between the male game and the female game. So if I start off with that, it's like the male game has always had like that hard grit type of thing, but ever since the past about 2 decades that I've been involved with this, I've seen a really strong growth in the female game in terms of the intensity, and you look at your girls, it's like perfect timing for them because they're strong women that are able to now like push forward. And what's really neat is that the athletes, like I guarantee if you put any of your kids in a match with like, you know, Sierra playing against dudes, like the dudes are going to be like, what is going on? Because normally there was a really big difference, right? But now there's a lot more equality, and I can't really equate that to anything other than maybe just, you know, not to be crazy here, but like the empowering of women through the generations. So, you know, that's one thing, but we're not going to get into that. So I like the fact that the level of intensity and growth that allows really the true person to come out, which I think is kind of neat. But what has happened in terms of what is going on in like level of training is that one level of training back in the day, even if you look at something like, which I love to watch, like bodybuilders way back in the day, and Arnold and all these greats, they didn't have the science and the supplements and the technology to be able to kind of get that like cutting edge. So for me, like the cutting edge technology, like I know, was it Kane and who else was going and they were like competing, you said they were like competing for numbers, like, oh, I got to this number, they were with a trainer.
Sierra and Kane.
Okay. And so if you look at that, that's something we didn't have back in the day, that evolution of technology that's able to give you a dramatic edge and an understanding that it's really the holistic athlete. So that evolution has been pretty dramatic. But when you look at kind of the culture, and I'm not going to put the Northeast on blast or anything like that, but we were down in your area and around the US, there aren't 47 different soccer clubs. There's a handful of strong soccer clubs. When you get in there, you basically stay there, you live there, and then you leave and get married. And so the idea is like, you know, the evolution of what's been built down there. And I'm looking at Texas, I'm looking at Florida, and a lot of the clubs around the United States, and they kind of build that culture. So here we switch a lot. You know, we're mad at this club, we're over here, we're mad at that club, we're over here. But that doesn't allow the club to create a culture. What that does is it shifts the focus of the club into the business side. In order to survive, they need to have people there. So, you know, now are we giving what's best for them? Oh man, so many people are going to get grumpy with this, but are we giving what's best for them? Or are we giving what's best for the club itself? And for me, not to mention the name, but the reason I'm stay with the club is because that I'm with is because I know that the intention behind it isn't a money grab. I know it's really just to help find what's best for the athlete and what's able to accommodate the different levels. So if you're looking at what's kind of shifted, is the technology shifted, the culture shifted. It is a business logically, but so is PFA, and so is all the chiropractic and everything that you do in the world. It is a business, but ultimately, where is that business coming from a good direction, I think is critical. But I think athletes right now, you know, there's such a density in what they have to deal with that we didn't have to deal with back in the day, looking at like social media, looking at really unhealthy foods and the manipulation of media in order to get you to buy and think you need this pair of running shoes so you can be the top in the state. And the reality is the top in the state are the ones that we know, the ones that are going to train. Kane is like, I'm going to go train. Almost like where you have to say like, hey, you know, like you're there for like 2 hours. Can you like come home and, you know, like be with the family? And they're like, I want to train. And that's something that I think has been lost a little bit, but that's what I'm trying to also bring back, that grit, that hard work. And I understand that not everybody is going to be an Olympian because there's a certain level of genetics that needs to be in that. But I do know that I've seen kids that have gotten them in 6th and 7th grade that are respectfully like chaos. And when they get to their sophomore, their junior, their senior year, they're such impressive athletes because they've put in the work, they've put in the time, they've clicked the check mark on all the basics that they need to do, and they've figured out how to level up like that 1% every day. So a lot has changed, but I think also bringing back some of that old school grit and just hard work and relentless is, you know, in combination, like old school, new school mix. I think that's kind of like the trick right now that people need.
Well, I think we got to teach kids how to compete again and how to take constructive criticism. I think, you know, kids have gotten soft because the parents keep telling them how good they are. And then when they're not exceeding,
oh yeah,
talking about like the soccer clubs, etc., they blame the coaches, they blame the organization, they don't know what they're doing, and then they move to another organization, then they move to another organization, and it's always someone else's fault. instead of taking responsibility for your outcomes and your standards. And I think that's what's nice about joining programs like yourself is I've seen it with my kids down here is they're around kids that are D1 athletes or they're training for the combine who are absolutely insane. And they're seeing people move at a speed that they've never seen before.
Yeah.
And they realize, okay, that's my new standard. Like, I just don't want to be, because one of the biggest issues I always had is because my kids are natural athletes, right? Me and Tammy were athletic, was there's nothing worse than a kid who excels young, but then there's nothing to work towards. And then they peak out by the time they get to high school.
Oh,
And
yeah. They were the fast kid. They were the
Yep.
strong kid. And eventually, you know, they didn't have to grow, which is actually one of the reasons I love kind of like smaller kids, because they had to figure out the game to be able to compete against the bigger kids. And then
Right.
eventually they get bigger and better and stronger. And they
They
just,
got to be hungry. They got to have something
oh,
to work
yeah.
towards.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and that's why I think, you know, having a coach, you know, even as adults, like now I'm coaching and helping mentor grown men that are businessmen. They're successful, but maybe they struggle with their marriage, their home life, their relationships with their kids. So it's okay to have a coach. It's okay to have someone who's been in a place that you're not, like yourself, who could say, all right, let's clock how fast you're going. And the mom thinks the child's fast, and you're like, you're not that fast. But you could do better. We could teach you technique. We could strengthen the right muscles to help you adapt, move faster, and avoid injury, which is even more important.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, I think looking at like the entire 360-degree, because people ask, like you said at the beginning, how would somebody describe what you do? And for me, the in the door is I'm a soccer guy that can work on strength and performance. But the reality is that I talk to people about sleep quality. I talk to people about healthy habits. I talk to people about even nutrition. And I'm not a nutritionist, but I have them understand. And I think I did this with Sierra. I encouraged it one day and I was like, hey, go for a week high fat, go for a week high carbs, go for a week high protein and see how you feel. And after you realize like, hey, I felt really, like for me, I feel energetic on carbs, but then I also feel like kind of brain fog if I'm not eating my fats, and I don't feel as strong and I don't feel like as capable if I'm not taking in my protein. So then I figured out like, okay, I need all these things. And that relationship with the food has built a difference in terms of, you know, my wife knows, hey, I need to be able to have meat because of my iron, because of what it does in terms of me and feeling strong, which leads into my confidence. So I think the holistic view of what we need to do now for athletes, and it's the grit, it's the sleep, it's the put down the social media, it's the go out and train on your own. And it's so complex that every once in a while, you're right, you do need a coach that can hold you accountable, that is on your side. But what I really like is somebody, I was actually in your office yesterday and I was talking with them and they said, you know, you'd probably be a good coach, you know, and they were reflecting on where I coach and such. And I said, well, the nice thing that I do is I'll tear into you, but I'll do it from a place of love and I won't feel bad because I know it. Because I'll look at you and I say, I've seen what you can do. I've got 2 years where I know you as an athlete and I don't know what you just did. That was a pile of crap. Now, if I come over to you and I don't have that relationship built and that love and you know where I'm coming from and I say, whatever you just did is a pile of crap, I think people are a little bit like, you know, they don't see as to how to do it. But if you come from a place of love and knowledge and experience and you've proven yourself a little bit to them, then you can really bring them up. So that coach, you're right, is a good asset. And you know what? There are some kids that go and they work hard on their own and they don't have a trainer and things like that. And the neat thing is I look at that and I love the work that they're putting in, but then I'm also like, oh, if they change their mechanics a little bit and trained a little more this way, then they actually would see accelerated results. So it's kind of like, it's a slippery slope to be where I am. But what's really neat is that when COVID hit, I actually launched remote training. I have over 500 trainings, but I don't advertise it very much. And I'm actually working with a young athlete, super driven in Northern Michigan. And we talk about that as well. I said, she worked so hard. She did as much as she could. But until she started training with you, until she started training with a coach, when she did that hard work and that like kind of laser focus, the results were different, you know? So like working hard and working all the time and being busy, I don't necessarily think that's a great thing. It's what are you doing precisely to have somebody that say like, hey, here are your avenues, like a business coach, like like a personal trainer and such, being able to laser target them is what the real value is in a coach.
Yeah. And I like that the laser target them
Hmm.
is huge because you know it's not necessarily trying to make your kid the best because there's always someone better. I mean,
Hmm.
it's we've traveled the country with the soccer thing, and I'll never forget we were out in San Diego for like the national championships, and Sierra had a guard like the number one offensive player that was going to Duke, and this girl just moved at a new speed. And Sierra banged. I mean, they banged and banged and banged, and finally the girl hit a goal from like 22 out. Like Sierra wasn't even close to her. And the girl literally walked over to Sierra and gave her a hug because she knew there was nothing she could do about it. She pounded the entire game.
Yeah.
After the game, Sierra's just like, I need to be adjusted. But that grind of realizing that level was there's always someone that's just another level, another
Oh,
notch. And it's,
yeah.
but I think what I love about you is the mentality you bring to the table with these kids to support them, because what we're seeing in society with the levels of anxiety and depression with children, and they're not going to talk to their parents about it, but to have a mentor that's outside that box
Yeah.
that could see them. Sierra was training with this guy, and they had guys training for the combine down here in Florida. And he called me one day. He said, I can't break this girl, man. She's got a hell of a game face. She just keeps going, going, going. And my ego didn't flare up. I said, well, that could be a bad thing too.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want her hiding her emotions. This was just right after the Stanford goalie, the poor
Oh,
girl
yeah.
committed suicide. And I went out to lunch with Sierra, and this is when she was, she lost her scholarship and because of the COVID thing. And it was a
Yeah.
tough time for the kid. I sat down with her and I said, honey, this whole thing screwed you. I don't want you stressed out thinking you have to play D1, because that was her goal since, she was 10 years old, and she accomplished it and got screwed. And I said, there are other options. Either you never play again, you just go to college. It's not your fault. You accomplished your goal, but the world took it on you. But we had to sit down and I had to catch that moment. I'm like, by the grace of God, I did, because I said, I don't want you thinking you have to keep pushing like this. And she was like, no, Dad, I'm good. It's just her makeup, thank God. And now she's crushing it in college. But to have
Yeah.
someone like you to be there emotionally to connect with these kids and tap into their mind, I think that's where you're really brilliant as well, as far as the training aspect.
I appreciate that. And honestly, I think it comes from me from a place of God and support. Like I said earlier, number of times, as long as I'm coming from a good place, an honest place, that I'm not trying to belittle, hold them down, tear them down. If anything, holding somebody accountable a little bit from love is one of the healthiest things that we don't have right now. Is I think I think in a society right now where we're really concentrated on earthly things, I think it's a would be a much better idea to concentrate on things that are a little more inside. And when you
Yeah.
support through love and you can push that way, it makes a big difference. And I've had parents call me, which is kind of opened my eyes up a number of years ago. Parents call me and saying she's going through, mind you, I'm this kid's trainer. She's going through boy troubles. Can you talk with her? And I'm like, yeah, yeah, I can. And the reason why is by the way, I've put this kid through the point where like they're just destroyed at workouts, right? Because I have things called break sessions, which I don't use often, but it's pushing them to their limit and then just continue to push them until they literally are like emotional, because
Yeah.
they've realized that the limits they've had before aren't really the limits they have, which allow us to create what I call a 2.0. So it's funny when the parents call you and they say, hey, can you talk to them, they're going through boy issues, or I'll see them the next time and the dad's like, hey, can you go give her a hug? Think about this society right now where a grown man can't hug a young lady because it's all the craziness that's in there, where the
Yeah.
parents like, we kind of need you a little bit. And
Yeah.
and I appreciate you seeing that it is like, grit and coming from a good place, because I really try to do that. And sometimes it sits tough in me because I don't always have success with every athlete. I actually interview athletes, they interview me, and I have to be very careful that the dynamic is very strong, because I'm going to push you in a direction that you might not always. And I need to be able to have the dynamic, that really loving trust where we know that it's coming from a good place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's just, I appreciate that very much. And it's something that I've leaned on heavily, understanding that I'm not going to hide my faith. I'm not going to hide my intensity. I'm an absolute lunatic, but I'm also really coming from a good place of love. And then once all those little things are in line, I'm going to push you until like you don't even want to look at a soccer ball again. But then you're going to be excited to come back next week.
So I think that's, why, no, I don't think I know, one of the most important elements that I love about what you do is your faith. And you mentioned it, God, which is, I speak around the country and there's conferences I went to where they said, just don't talk about God. And I'm like, well, now you're really in trouble because it's who I am, right?
Yeah.
It's why I'm successful is my faith has gotten me through the dark times, and to surround yourself with people of faith. And now here's what's beautiful, man, about coming down here, Kane's baseball team before the game, they go out to left field, they all kneel down in a circle and they say a prayer.
Yeah.
Every sport has a leadership mentor who's a spiritual leader that meets with the kids and builds a relationship, and he'll talk biblical principles with these kids. It's a public high school. Every Tuesday, he goes and has lunch. They have Chick-fil-A brought in. They sit down. They talk about the Bible. This is in a public school, bro.
Yeah.
Public school. So I'm like, I get goosebumps just saying it, knowing, and the guy that's helping him talk to him is an older guy, crew cut. Like, he's not a pushover. He's a tough dude.
Yeah.
And Kane loves it. He's like, yeah, every Tuesday, I'm like, oh my Lord. And now they're taking him on a mission trip to Dominican Republic. They're going to play baseball against the Dominicans. Every morning is breakfast and devotional.
Yeah.
Go serve the community, play baseball, go serve the community. I'm like, you can't make this up. But I said, it's time now for people of faith to speak up and start helping these kids, because we got to bring God back into society.
Oh, yeah.
And listen, I know most of these people, they're going to the church and they're getting their kids communion and they're all in. They're just afraid to step on toes. I'm like, it's time to break ankles. We got to bring it back, man, and get people of strength and faith to speak up. It's time.
I agree. And I think, especially looking at we have the instruction manual to life. We have it. It's in the Word of God. And when you look at it, and so I'm sitting and I'm on my way back from New York City. I went to Comic-Con with my nephew, who's in his 20s, a great kid, but he was just never grown in faith and never really understood it. And so I was playing a game with him. I said, okay, so here's what I want you to do. And he's completely open. He's definitely like a best friend to me. And he's like, okay, Uncle D, let's talk about this. So I said, okay, think about the last struggle that you had. And he's like, oh, I don't know, anxiety or something like that. He didn't say anxiety, but it was something. So I said, okay, search Bible verse on anxiety. And then he was reading it and his face changed. And he's like, okay, all right. And then I told him, search something else. Bible verse on family, Bible verse on, like how the word protects you in terms of Ephesians or anything like, just search it. And he's like, I can't believe it. Like, this makes sense. And I said, because people look at the church as like some, like, you got to sit in the thing and pray and hymns and all that in Psalm 155. And, but the reality is that it tells you life lessons on how to love yourself, how to love others. And so I had a really deep conversation with my wife, who grew up, mom's Catholic and dad's Jewish. And she didn't really grow up really, let's say, just call it religious. And for her, she said, and I told, I mean, she's my wife. We've been together for 17 years. I said, like, be honest. She's like, well, sometimes the way it looks like a cult. And I said, I'll play that game. If it's a cult, then I'd join a cult that's about love. That's about turning the other cheek. That's about loving your neighbor. That's about being a support. That's on, like, looking outside of yourself. When somebody does you wrong, you still pray for them, which is most recently in the Bible verse this past week. When somebody does you wrong, do you still pray and hope that God will help them and bring them forward? And it's like that type of thing brings me away. And yesterday, while I was in the Word, while I was in prayer, I actually had like an out-of-body experience where I literally, like, my little world of all the crazy things that I'm doing and how busy I've kept myself, the world just exploded. And I was like in outer space looking at the earth. And I fight emotions as I say this, because it was like my problems, and my problems, by the way, are good problems, busy and wanted to do this. But my problems became very little. And I started looking at the world from like the outside in. And it
Yep.
brought me a level of peace yesterday that brought a level of productivity in me that I haven't seen in a while. And so it continues to remind myself, oh, you know what? I'm such an idiot. I realize that I've been writing now in my gratitude journal more often. And I just started 3 days ago. So that gratitude finally hit. What
Uh,
a bozo. So connecting the word of God with the gratitude, and a lot of the gratitude I've been writing on is just about appreciating the struggles and what, because I think iron and steel, they're all forged in incredible temperatures. But I think that word of God kind of helps guide us a little bit. And instead, we're in the word of TikTok, we're in the word of Instagram, where we compare ourselves to another person, and that comparison being the thief of joy. That's not something you find in the word of God. Plus, let's not even talk about like the sense of community and the support that you can get from nearly anybody. And what's really beautiful is the people that I see that struggle, which are very, very successful, like you're probably talking with successful business people, but their life is broken down and they're kind of like, front window Instagram life looks great, but behind the scenes, they're like, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I hate myself, I hate my body, I hate, I have a wonderful family and I hate them, like all these types of things. So the word of God it gives us such a simple instruction manual that even if you just spend a few minutes every day, it can bring you an entirely different perspective on how to appreciate what you have, how to understand that, we are all struggling, but through that struggle, there is like, God's time. Like I was reading today, God does have a time. So if you're in that middle time, appreciate, learn, stay in the faith. And eventually when it's ready for God's ready to open that door and click, then you are ready because you're coming from a good place. But yeah, we do need a lot more faith for sure.
And I think that's one of the greatest things parents need to realize when they get their children in front of you. It's more than just a 40 time. It's
Mhm.
about life.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest things that these coaches say down here, from my son's standpoint, is we're here to raise great men. Not every kid is going to go D1. Most of them will go D2. A lot of them will go D3 because these kids are absolutely freaking amazing.
Yeah.
But how many are going to go next level pro?
Mhm.
So they want them to come through this process to learn how to deal with stress, how to have faith, where to fall back on when times get tough,
Mhm.
how to have a tribe of people that are like-minded. It's a culture, and that's a culture that they join your program, that they're getting everything you just said. And that's what people need to realize. I think that's who you surround your kids with. I always said for my kids, my kids haven't needed for anything, but they don't expect anything. It's
Yeah.
my house has always been a boot camp where I'm like, you got to earn it. I said, you don't own this. I do. I'm letting you stay here, and in a couple of years you're gone. Like I just told Brooke last night, I said, this time next year you're gone. She's probably going to Florida State University. I said, you're 5 hours away. You're technically on your own
Yeah.
for the rest of your life. Like I'm done with you. And she laughed, but I said, you're ready. You're ready. It's just smiled. She said, yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah.
That moment comes, man. These people got to realize these kids now in elementary school, middle school, moving into high school, there comes that moment where, I always see the Facebook posts, they decorate the room and they're doing the little pictures and it's all cutesy. But
Yeah.
now mom and dad pull away, and that
Yeah.
kid,
Door closes.
they got that kid's going to be faced with a lot of stuff, and they're going to have to make a lot of decisions quick. Who are
Mhm.
they falling back on?
Yeah. Absolutely. I was having a conversation with my daughter, and I have it all the time. Sometimes they clean the room, sometimes they do their little habits. And what's funny is I don't, as long as it's not like dirt, if things are around the room, it's not a big deal for me. But I was having, and she's 9. I was having a conversation about building the habits that will create a better adult. And I said, look, I understand you're not gonna understand this right now, but one day you're gonna look back at the simple habits. Make your bed, when you get up, do the things you need to do right away, and have like 45 minutes where you're like not certain what to do with yourself. So then you screw around, and then you're ready to get out the door. But those simple habits, and one thing that I love to do is I'll invite them. I don't force my kids to do anything. I don't force them to train soccer. I don't force them to go play sports or to go for a walk with me or strength train with me. My daughter's been lifting since she was 3 or 4, and like really, really lifting. And so I don't force them to do anything, but I invite them along, and through my habits, be able to show them like, look, I do mobility with my daughter. I do recovery with my daughter. I do strength training. We do soccer, technical development. But what I'm trying to do is develop the habits that are going to be able to lift her up. And what's cool is that when she struggles, guess where I immediately go to? When she's in a bind, guess where I go?
To your wife.
Nope, I go to the Bible. I go to the Bible because I want her to understand that when things go wrong, one, she can come to me. I don't ever judge if she's doing something poorly. I just look at her, like I said, I look at her and I say, I know what you can do, and I don't really think this is it. But we go to the Bible and say, okay, what is the Bible telling us? What is it telling us on, having an issue with a friend or somebody not being nice at school, or, how can we search to be able to find a verse that might apply to this, to allow her to understand where it might be that she's find some resources. Because it's already well established that my wife and I are a great resource. Her little brother is only 6 years old, so she does not have a clue that that's going to be a future best friend to her. So we'll get to that later. But being able to go and realize where you can get your resources, and it's neat. And so, like I said before, what I do is hard to describe. I can't put on my website that your kid will get emotional support. They will get love. They will get kindness. They will get hard work to the point where you're literally worried that they're going to break in half, but they're going to be in a safe place. And I might be the guy that when they're having a problem with a school or a teacher, I might be the guy you call up and say, hey, can you talk to them because they're having an issue with a teacher, they're having an issue with their current coach. The amount of conversations and things that I can't put on my website because who's going to be like, hey, I'll get you strong and I'll help you through your emotional times. It's not going to work. But that holistic view to be able to build the grittier athlete, to be able to build like relentless. I remember watching Sierra at Weathersfield High School. Ignore the natural talent or athleticism. When she doesn't quit, I don't even know if she lost the ball, but like if she did and she would go and fight it back, like that's a culture that you have within your family to be able to just like relentless work, always grinding, focus on what the priorities are. And Sierra was always like, writing this and doing that and prepping early and just being all really proactive. And that's what I think is really lacking in community right now is where do you go when things get tough? What do you do in order to lean on something that might be bigger than you, like God, like Jesus? And are you in an environment like you were alluding to? Are you in an environment where you have the resources that, I don't care if I have 7 million followers on Instagram. I want like 1,000 people that are dedicated and happy and write to me and say, hey, Diego, what you put today in like your casual, non-scripted type of conversation about like, have a freaking good day and stop being unhappy. I like that. That's the community that I want. And I think what you landed in there in Florida, I'm a little bit jealous of for two reasons. One is 80 degrees and I don't like the cold, which is why at the beginning I had to put on my vest. But I like the sense of community. I like the sense of hard work. I like the sense of like, if you fail, like who cares? Keep going, like keep grinding, keep working. And I like the fact that there are environments there where that's mixed into athletics. And I really like the fact that it's mixed into like a public school where it's not, it's kind of like, oh, you can't really like, why not? Like what else would you like us to do?
Yeah. So let's close out. I got two questions for you. One is, what's your favorite Bible verse?
So I lean into the early Psalms often, to the point where I know it's on page 555 of my Bible. And I lean into those often because the first few Psalms really are very like, they're very dramatic. Some are very uplifting. Some are very like, I believe like the break the teeth of your enemies type of stuff. And it kind of reminds me a lot of parts because I've had an issue where aligning my intensity with being good. But I remember when the church was being used to sell like idols and sell all these different type of trinkets, and Jesus went in and he didn't care about the fact that that's might be a poor person who was trying to sell things. He cared about the fact that it was disrespecting the church. So he just came and started flipping tables and like lost his mind. So
Matthew
for me,
21:12. Yep, Matthew 21:12.
Right. And so just went in and just started wreaking havoc. So for me, the Bible verses I love is those first few Psalms 1 through 4. Those first few, and because it just reminds me that life is good and uplifting and like, you know, Jesus loves us, but then it's also like I'm really not feeling good. And if my enemies come at me, kind of break things up, kind of break some teeth, which I literally think is I think in Psalms 3, if I'm not mistaken. But
And my final question is, when you hear "Wake Up Humans," what comes to mind?
I think we've gone in the wrong direction for society. I think we've gone one of the most challenging things that I have, like I have my blaze pods back here, which are reaction lights, and that leads me into technology. But I think that's all great, but I think we're losing a lot of the base of what we need as humans. I think we forget that we are communal creatures. I think that the level of depression is really the lack of community. I think the community that we dive into are things like, and by the way, I love Instagram. I mean, I love all the things that I see in there. I've been following more people that have like a little cross in their profile because they're speaking to me in a different way. But I think when I hear "Wake Up Humans," it's about, we need to start. You can't fix a problem unless you realize where the problem's coming from. And as a society, all the bad things that, you know, I can hit in terms of the check marks of anxiety and depression and all that really is the fact that we are not understanding, you know, and not to plug chiropractic, but people are like, oh, I don't need somebody to crack my back. I'm like, I would actually hope that my chiropractor does not crack my back. I mean, I would like to get adjusted because I understand what it feels like when I do get adjusted. And I think like we go and instead, what do? We pop pills, what I call cocktails, you know, while I'm coaching a kid who's like out of his mind and can't concentrate on anything. I'm like, what's going on? And the parents like, oh, we're on a new cocktail of medication. I'm like, if they just went into the basics of what life is about,
Yeah.
eat a little bit healthier, spend time in a community, spend time in something that's greater than you, like faith-based, and to be able to just look at the simplicity of things. I think we kind of need to snap out, put down our phones, spend a little time and all of that, spend a little time in nature with each other, spend a little time just sitting around. I don't even like board games, but I like to sit around while my family plays them, to be able to just like kind of snap out, like I did yesterday, snap out of all like the things that are tugging me in the wrong direction, get a bigger scope, and then finally wake up as humanity, be able to support each other, love each other, and push each other in a way that you don't get sensitive simply because somebody's telling you what you're not supposed to do, because you've already built a relationship of love and trust, and you know where they are coming from. So hopefully people do wake up and do understand that life is beautiful. You know, I don't generate happiness. I'm legitimately happy because I understand that my bases are all covered in the things that are super critical for me. So
What's the best way people can contact you?
so my website is premierfa.com. You can look me up on Instagram. There is that really is the place that I'm most active on. But I have a new social media manager that's going to be putting me out into more places. The idea is just to not generate business, but to really lift up and serve the community, which is something that's really critical to me. But Premier FA is PREMIERFA.com, and that has a link to all of my social media. So come follow. Especially one thing that I love is ask to be part of my close friends list, because then you get to see how I treat my kids. Then you get to see how I, you know, the little goofiness and that type of stuff. But the rest of it, if it's all just for sports performance and development, then just stay on the reels and the pictures, and you might get some ideas.
Listen, man, appreciate you. That was awesome. People need to hear this. We need to get this out there everywhere, especially in that, you know, Wethersfield, Newington, Rocky Hill, Glastonbury community where people are close to you. The kids can get around them. And I know their life will be better just because of you, man. I appreciate your time, pal. Thank you.
I appreciate you, man. Lots of love. Be amazing, and God bless.